How's everybody doing out there? You guys got to forgive me right now. I'm a little under the weather. I've had like the flu for 3 days. Today's day three. I'm beat up right now, but I figured I'd put a little video together about Mid Orange Correctional Facility, which is a medium security prison. It's no longer open. I believe it closed in 2011. Yeah, let me fix. I'm a messy. I'm telling you, I'm sick right now. I don't feel good. I'm wondering if I should even be doing this, but I'll do it anyway. Mid Orange Correctional Facility was a medium security prison that I was in. It closed in 2011. While I was in there, it closed. It was the only time I had been in a facility, been in a prison that closed down. I'll get to what happened when that took place on everything that happened. I'll show you something real quick. I'm gonna cover a little bit of my personal information. That's the ID card that we carry in prison. You got to have at all times right there. You carry that ID card. That's an inmate prison ID card. You know, see, that's that right there. And then when I got released, this is a release card. When they released me from Queensboro, it's hard to see with the glare. That's a release card, just like a regular, like a driver's license. But we had to go walk around with that, keep the ID card on us at all times, no matter what prison you're in. You have the ID card. So Mid Orange Correctional Facility. Mid Orange Correctional Facility was medium. So after I left the maximum security prison, my classification dropped down to medium security, and they moved me to Mid Orange. And when I got to Mid Orange Correctional Facility, I learned it had a nickname, and the nickname for Mid Orange was the best kept secret in the Department of Corrections, and it was the best kept secret for sure. If you were going to do time, Mid Orange was the place to do time. Is in Warwick, New York. There was 750 prisoners there. It was the facility itself was on 740 acres of rolling hills on a lake with trees and raccoons and skunks and birds and squirrels, and it was a pretty facility as far as facilities were concerned. There were no cells in this facility. It was all rooms or dormitories. I'll explain that as well, what it was like, cottages. But when I pulled into Mid Orange on the bus, the first thing I noticed was prisoners walking dogs around, which was just unbelievable for me because I spent many years before my incarceration training dogs on a highly professional level. So I had a natural love for dogs. And in this place, there was a program called PBB, run by Gloria, Puppies Behind Bars. That's what PBB stand for. And men lived with dogs and kept the dogs with them 24 hours a day. The only place the dogs were not allowed to go was into the mess hall where the food was and into the infirmary where the medical care was. And they had alternative dog handlers. So if you had to go to one of those places, you would leave your dog with one of the alternative dog handlers. Otherwise, the dog stayed with you 24/7, slept in the room with you. You went to classes several times a week and were taught how to train the dogs. And it was a unique program. They trained dogs for wounded war veterans. Sometimes those wounded war veterans would come into the facility and you would actually turn the dog over to them. And the dogs were taught things on how to turn on lights, how to open doors, how to take off sneakers, just, many unique things for to help wounded war veterans. The dogs were also trained for EDC work, which is explosive detection. It stands for explosive detection canine, EDC. And we taught dogs how to use their nose. And so I was in that program for a little while. I was in that program. So when I first got there and I saw all the dogs, that was just something that was very special, very unique. Even for the guys that weren't in the dog program, they got to see the dogs and pet the dogs and play with the dogs and watch the dogs run around their own yard. The dogs had their own recreational yard. So that was special. There's a few facilities that had puppies behind bars in New York State, and there's a few states with the program. But Mid Orange Correctional Facility was one of those. It had originally opened as a boys' home, Mid Orange Correctional Facility, many decades ago. I think in the 60s or 70s, it had become a medium security prison, if I'm correct. So again, when the bus pulls in, I see all these dogs and the trees and everything like that. It was pretty cool. And there's cottages. That's what they look like, little houses. This is where the prisoners are housed. And on the ground floor of the cottage is where there's a dormitory where about maybe 15, 20 prisoners live, and then down the other hallway are single man rooms. So you have your own room down there. And so that's the way the setup was. And there was a bunch of cottages, maybe 20 cottages, something like that. They were really spread out far from one another throughout the acres of the facility. And so there was a lot of walking in Mid-Orange. You did a lot of walking when you had to go somewhere. The walk to the mess hall to eat was far. So on a snowy day or a rainy day, it was, you had to walk to the mess hall, maybe a quarter mile, each way. It depends what cottage you were in. And and the upstairs from each cottage was like a vocational thing. You may have a barber shop upstairs in one, a drug program in another. The upstairs of the cottages were used for various things that the facility needed, and the downstairs was where the prisoners were housed. Mid-Orange, when the bus pulls in, the first thing a prisoner does in any prison is he goes to the draft room, which is like a reception. And I said that Mid-Orange was called the best kept secret in the Department of Corrections, and I'll explain why. Mid-Orange housed lifers, men serving a life sentence. There weren't many medium security prisons that housed lifers. I'm not saying Mid-Orange was the only one, but there was only a couple, less than a handful of medium security prisoners that would take lifers. Mid-Orange was one of those. They would accept someone with a life sentence. I think Fishkill may have been the other one. And because of that, you had a lot of prisoners that knew how to do time. They had served a lot of time already. They may have done 10, 15, 20, 30 years already. And they wanted to get to Mid-Orange because Mid-Orange was a good facility. Because of that, the officers treated them a lot differently because the officers knew how to do time. And so the officers didn't harass them. And you had a lot of officers there that had a lot of seniority. So this created a pretty decent environment for prison. You had prisoners that knew how to do time, and you had officers that didn't harass them. And this made it a little special for a prison. Okay. So I get off the bus and I'm taking my property off the bus that I traveled with. And you go upstairs into the draft room where the prisoners that work in reception are up there. And when I walk upstairs, I see about six Italian guys sitting around the table, and they got wine on the table, real wine from the street, and they're eating food from the street, like lobster tails. I had never seen this before in 14 years of prison. It was like Goodfellas, like when the guy's cutting the garlic with the razor. I walked up there and saw these guys sitting there, these prisoners sitting there. And my first question to them was, "Yo, you guys are prisoners?" And it turned out Anthony was up there. Anthony was a made man. I don't say their last names, out of it's not right for me to do that. Anthony was up there, very well known mob guy. He had a couple of murders. He had like 30 years in prison. He ended up making it out, to be honest. He ended up released. Frankie Baba was up there. He was involved in the Joe Gallo hit. My man had like almost 40 years in prison. Mikey was up there, really good Italian guy up there. And these guys had that draft room locked down. They had it in control. It was a nice spot. I said, "How do I get a job up here?" That was my first words. The old man said, "It takes years, kid. It takes years." I said, "Well, I'm getting a job up here. You get me a job up there." Eventually, I got the job up there with the fellas. It was a good spot. And we ate good food up there. We drank good. We ate good. And, it was a better place to do time, especially all the places that compared to what I had done before. So Mid-Orange was good in that aspect, I also had heard, I'll tell you, a guy that came into Mid-Orange throughout my whole bid. Everyone used to tell me, "Yo, you heard of Shlomo?" So I said, this was anyway, it started in Rikers Island when I was in Rikers Island. Guys would tell me, "Yo, you heard of Shlomo?" And I said, "No." They said, "Yo, it's the toughest Jew you'll ever meet in your life, a prisoner." And I said, "Yeah." They said, "Oh, yeah, he's crazy, tough guy." I get to the next prison. Guys, his name would pop up in the next prison. "Yo, you heard of Shlomo?" And I said, No, I mean, I heard guys talk about him." I said, and everyone would say the same thing. "Yo, toughest Jew you'll ever meet in your life." And officers used to say it as well. Officers would talk about this guy. And any facility I went to, Sing Sing, Attica, mediums, maxes. They would mention this guy Shlomo, and while I was in Mid Orange, Shlomo came into Mid Orange. He had about 30 something years in prison at the time, served already, and I was in Mid Orange for a few months already, and Shlomo got off the bus. So I said, let me go meet this guy. I want to meet this guy. Everyone has been talking about him for years. And so I head over to the draft room. I go walking over to the draft room, and I see him walking. He's about 60 years old, built like a tank, like a little Israeli tank, carrying 2 bags of property in his 60s that most kids couldn't carry. And I walk up to him. I say, yo, you Shlomo? He said, I'm the toughest Jew you'll ever meet in your life. And I became great friends with Shlomo. That became one of my partners there. That became my cooking partner there. We spent a lot of time together. The guy was ingenious. He was a very smart man. He unfortunately, you say, well, how smart could he be? He was in prison. Listen, there's some smart people that go to prison. You know what I mean? People that make mistakes. Shlomo was a diamond cutter, and he got involved in a diamond heist in the Diamond District in Manhattan, and then ended up getting 25 to life. And so I got to meet Shlomo. He was very inventive, very creative, very smart. And Shlomo ended up, after I left, he ended up dying when he went out for a routine, I believe, hernia operation. I believe he died on the table, Shlomo. It broke my heart. He was someone that I would have remained in close touch with. So I got to see Shlomo there. So Mid Orange was very unique. Something else I wanted to say is you have people, everyone leaves comments on the videos, and I guess you see some people that are really stupid. Some people leave some stupid comments. Like one guy left a comment about my Attica Correctional Facility video. He said to me, you're lying about beating someone up on the volleyball court because Attica didn't have volleyball. Well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, because in D Block, in the Honor Dorm, there's a volleyball court, and we used to go out there and play volleyball every day. Okay, I'm trying to get my buddy Dave Lawson on the show right now, because Dave was there when it happened, and Dave wanted to stab the dude I got into the fight with. I had to talk him out of it. Dave was nuts. When I came in, Dave's like, yo, let's stab the guy. I said, Dave, relax. So yes, there was a volleyball court there, and this guy don't know what he was talking about. Maybe there's not anymore, but I was in Attica in 2000. That's 24 years ago. So who knows? The next guy, then the same guy, I guess it calls like trolling you. Is the guy trolling me? Then I don't know. I'm not sure what that means. I'm new to all this stuff. Then he leaves another comment saying that the officers didn't punch me in the face because it would have been on camera. In the year 2000, Attica didn't have any cameras indoors. So I don't know what he's talking about. But I know for a fact in the year 2000, when I was there through 2006, there were no cameras in Attica Correctional Facility inside the facility. So again, the guy don't know what he's talking about. Then he came back and left another comment again. I'm sorry for going on with this. And this one was about where I said that 70% of the population of Attica Correctional Facility had a life sentence. And he sends me these statistics from the Department of Corrections that says 18% of the population has life. But 18% of all the population of all the facilities has life. That doesn't mean that Attica Correctional Facility doesn't have a higher life sentence population. Okay, if you're talking about all of it, anyway, I'm tired of you. I lived through it. I've been through it. I went through it for decades of my life, So these people that leave some stupid ass comments, you computer gangsters. That's what they talk all types of shit on the computer behind the screen. It's ridiculous. But which brings me to a topic about the prison system in general. I'll tell you something about the prison system in general. And a lot of people could get upset hearing this. People ask me about what the hardest part about doing time was in the prison system, and I always told them that besides missing my family and friends, the hardest part was living with the other prisoners. That was the hardest part about doing time, because the majority, everybody's an individual, so don't get on my ass for this. The majority of prisoners don't know how to do time. They're crackheads. They're fucking off the bottom of the barrel, off the street. They're peasants. They get arrested for petty crimes. Okay. They were picking up cigarette butts off the street. And then they come into prison and talk about they had a drop top helicopter and they were a pimp and they were this and they were that. They were the big shot on the street, but they didn't have nothing on the street is the reality. And they come into prison and try to make themselves be something that they're not. And they don't know how to follow prison rules. They don't know how to follow prison laws. They made it hard on all of us, and they caused the officers to be assholes because they didn't know how to do time. Okay. And that's the fact. So I'm going to read you a little something. Let me read you a little something here. I got to put on the glasses, right? This was not written by me. This was written by my friend Eric, and I saved it through all these years. Eric was a prisoner. And when I read this, it was so true to form, right? That you just listen to it for yourself. I really think you'll enjoy this. It's called Prison Bitches. That's what it's called. If you think women are worse than men at gossiping, backbiting, and spreading rumors, think again. Male-dominated institutions are rapid with men verbally vomiting on one another, snitching on each other, and betraying a peer's confidence. This is especially true in prisons for men. Female sorority houses would blush from the girlish ways men divulge intimate secrets entrusted to them by a friend. No one is safe from being verbally poisoned by the mouths of idle male prisoners. Not television personalities, dynamic sports figures, nor Jesus Christ himself. Male prisoners are quick to dump nasty negatives on the unblemished resumes of others. It could realistically be said that many male prisoners that they are bitches masquerading in a man's body. If your ears itch to hear about somebody's dirty laundry, whether it's true or false, male prisoners will eagerly piss down your eardrum, filling it to the brim. And if you are looking for some he said, she said bullshit, men in prison won't disappoint your expectations for detail. If you are thirsty for an array of fictitious stories, lies, or character assassination tidbits, come to a New York prison facility and they will quench your nosy ass thirst. It is clear how more than 50% of male prisoners got arrested, convicted, and sent to prison. They talked their way straight through the process, right along with a big-mouth co-defendant who told the whole story at trial. I had always held to the prejudice that women were incapable of keeping their mouths shut. I believed women saw the word confidentiality as a laughable term. But after spending long over a decade inside prison with so-called hardened criminals, I sadly discovered that men are actually worse than their female counterparts when it comes with confidentiality issues. Male prisoners breach one another's confidence with relative ease. The word confidentiality is a senseless term to be used in male institutions. Prison officials are forced every day to demand that prisoners cease from mailing in snitch slips about another prisoner's behavior to their office. Concerning a fatal stabbing that once took place in Attica, the superintendent's office made an announcement over the prison speaker system and television setup. We have the guilty attacker. No additional information slips from the prison population are necessary. If there is a difference between men and women in the area of breaching confidentiality, men tend to react with deadlier force when discovering their trust has been violated. The Bible says in James chapter 3, verse 7 and 8, "For every kind of beast and of bird and of serpents and of things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison." So if you have the untold story at the tip of your tongue, be a man, show some backbone, and control yourself. What is even more horrible is when someone speaks and the perversion occurs, when the stories are modified and embellished with slanderous lies. Betraying another person's trust is bad in and of itself, but taking the liberty to ad-lib with injurious lies makes the act of betrayal twice as treacherous. A lot of male prisoners can be classified as prison bitches. This is not meant in a sexual context, but more or less in the context of the stereotypical bitch-like talkative mannerisms they possess. Prison bitches are usually envious and jealous of another peer's possessions, relationships, personal style, or anything that uniquely stands out in another prisoner's character. I was in the prison yard one night when I overheard two men having a discussion about a prisoner who had just come off a visit with his wife. One prisoner said to the other, "Hey, you see that dude over there? Word to the mother, son. His wife is drop dead gorgeous. To this, the other prisoner replied, who? You mean that funny style nigga over there? Shit, that motherfucker's a bitch. He don't deserve her. That motherfucker is soft. What these two so-called men didn't know was that the brother who had just come off the visit with his wife overheard every word that they spoke perfectly, and he was far from being a bitch or soft. About 10 minutes later, as those two so-called men were talking, most likely about someone else at this point, the guy that was on the visit with his wife came up behind one of them, slit his throat, and then stabbed the other guy in the center of his chest, killing him instantly. This night, these prison bitches picked the wrong guy to talk about. The characteristics of a prison bitches are the following. They are envious without reason, jealous without justification, gossipers without restraint, backbiters without conscience. They spread embellished rumors for thrill-seeking purposes, and they live to tell mischievous lies with no worthwhile rewards to do so. Prison bitches are mostly noted for their walking, talking soap opera attributes. Prison bitches have nothing positive to say about anyone. They speak behind other people's backs instead of having the balls to say it to the person's face, and they aren't capable of praising another for his talents. Prison bitches possess a one-track mind, which is to tear others apart emotionally, socially, and psychologically if possible. If they can't achieve these ends through legitimate means, they will throw dirt on your name to accomplish their task. Prison bitches rarely eyewitness the events that are communicated from their mouths. And because their information is generally groundless, without facts or proof, they shrewdly shy away from face-to-face confrontations, requiring that they qualify their stories. When a prison bitch is finally cornered to verify what they've spoken, the conversation degenerates into a bunch of he said, she said, secondhand allegations. This is when you see what true bitches they really are. Chasing down the source of a prison bitch is like trying to track down a ghost. Prison bitches have always been around, but in the past it was easier to keep them in check. You gave a prison bitch a black eye, a busted nose, or you stuck a piece of steel in his kidney, and that usually made them more cautious with their mouth. But disciplining a prison bitch isn't so easy anymore. They are well protected with laws, harsh sentencing, protective custody, and they flirt under these laws with impunity, and they get away with destroying people's lives. They put good men in bouts of danger. There is little protection against the prison bitch's sting these days, except by being armed with the knowledge that what goes around comes around, and they will get it after all is said and done. That is a great story to describe the prison system in New York. Everyone says, I'm not here to take the side of guards. I'm not here to take the sides of prisoners. All right. I'm just a man that was in prison. I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm saying that, yes, there's many abusive guards. There's guards that are pieces of shit. There's guards that go out of the way to screw with people, to set people up, to mess with people. But there's prisoners that make the guards that way too, that don't know how to do time. They don't know how to live like men. They don't know how to keep their mouth shut. Right. And so it's terrible living in there. I would smoke a joint. I smoke a little joint, not just me, anyone. And a guy smokes a joint. And the next day, the administration gets 10 slips, 10 kites that people send to the administration. So-and-so is smoking pot in his cell. So-and-so has a weapon. And they have nothing to gain from it. They tell for no reason. They tell because they have hate in their hearts, because they have animosity. They tell because they see you go to commissary and they don't have money for commissary. So they try and bring you down. They tell because you have a visit and they don't have anyone to visit them. So they try and rat you out to bring you down. So you thought that maximum security prison was filled with men. You know what I mean? It's not like that. That was the biggest thing that caught me off guard when I went into the prison system. Because before I went into the system, I was with some tough guys on the street. Wise guys that robbed armored cars, guys that did a lot of time, guys that if you showed up 5 minutes late, they wanted to know why you were late. There was rules, there was regulations, it was serious. And I knew how to carry myself and conduct myself properly. I knew how to move is what I'm saying. And I figured prison would be the same way. But when you get in there, it's not that way. There's a bunch of fucking lowlives in there. There's some good prisoners. There's some good guys. You got to find those few good guys and make that part of your clique, because the rest of them are like fucking peasants in there. If I was on the parole board, I probably wouldn't release 40% of them. I have to say that. Animals. Guys that never worked a day in their life. They blame the judge. They blame the lawyer. They blame their family. They blame everyone in the world and accept no personal responsibility at all. At all. Right? So that's what I was forced to live with all those years. That's part of the prison system. Anyway, back to Mid-Orange. Excuse me, my throat is killing me. I told you I'm getting over the flu. Back to Mid-Orange. I'll give you, it's a similar example. They had the YAP program in Mid-Orange, YAP. That stands for the Youth Assistance Program. This is where youth, teenagers would come into the facility and the prisoners would go down into a auditorium or a visit room and speak to these kids. And it's like a Scared Straight program, but it wasn't supposed to be a Scared Straight program. It's called the YAP program. And the YAP program was run by Deacon Rosado. Okay, he was the deacon's facility. He was the deacon in the facility. He's a great man, Deacon Rosado. I love him. And I don't know where he is. I heard he lives in Florida now. I'll always care for Deacon Rosado. What a great guy. He helped the prisoners with many things. And his boss was the DEP of programs, Catherine Jacobson. And so I don't know Deacon Rosado yet, and I write him a letter and said I would like to participate in the youth assistance program. I thought it would be great for me to speak to kids and prevent them from coming into imprisonment. And so no response. So I'd wait a few weeks and drop another letter. After 4 or 5 letters and no response, I wrote the program administrator, Catherine Jacobson, who was the DEP administrator of programs. Another great woman in the Department of Corrections. She was really concentrated on helping prisoners. She wasn't one of the bad ones. And I wrote Catherine Jacobson and said, I'd like to be part of this program. I said, and she called me to a meeting. And what I discovered was the reason Deacon Rosado wasn't responding to me is because he allowed one of the prisoners to respond to all his mail. So the prisoner saw that I was trying to get into the program and he was just throwing my letters in the garbage. The reason he was doing this was he had all of his friends in the program. The reason he brought his friends into the program is because he thought that being in the program would look good for parole when it was time to get released on parole. If you said you were helping kids, that would look good for parole. So he brought his friends in there, okay? And he was trying to keep everyone else out. So when I discovered that, I wrote to Catherine Jacobson. Catherine Jacobson called me down for the interview. I went down for the interview. As soon as I walked in the room, she put me on blast. She didn't even let me sit down. She goes, why do you want to be in the program? I said, I would love to work with the youth. She said, let me hear your story. And I went right into a 45-minute story, my life story, a story I haven't spoken yet on YouTube. It's coming soon. But when I was done with the story, she was hysterical crying. She asked me if I wanted to take over the program. Obviously, there was a lot of animosity, too fucking bad, because I was there for the sincere reason of helping youth, not to get my boys to make parole. Okay. And so I went in there, I took over the program. I said, the first thing we have to do is to see if the 10 men in the program actually deserve being here. So we held an interview where we were going to hear all their speeches. 6 or 7 of them didn't even show up. Long story short, we created a new program. We had one guy who would talk about drug addiction, one guy who would talk about the importance of education, one guy who would talk about gang life, one guy, and so on. And we created a really great program. And we had people coming in from juvenile detention centers, military academies, high schools, group homes. The program became popular. Not to pat myself on the back, I fell in love with it so much that Catherine Jacobson started asking me. She said, listen, I have a group that's coming in. Would you mind speaking to them alone? No problem. I would go down there and speak to this group. And this gave me an idea that it's something I should do when I go home. And so I created a program when I came home, and it's something that I did. So I'll show you a little something. These are all different. Well, it doesn't even matter. I'll read you one more thing. I ended up speaking. I'll say this. I ended up speaking to, and I'll read you the letter. It says, I am writing this letter to lend my support for Joseph in his request for parole. I am the director of the United States Agency for International Development Office in the U.S. Embassy to Barbados in the Eastern Caribbean, and in this capacity, I oversee the implementation of a range of foreign assistance programs across this region. I have been a U.S. Foreign Service officer since 1983, serving in 9 countries. Caribbean societies are threatened by increased international drug trafficking and related spiraling of youth crime and violence. Our embassy and my USAID office are working with local governments and civil society to find ways to turn back the tide before it engulfs these small island nations, before they rival Mexico in mayhem and disorder. One new tool that we are using is the powerful and personal message of life experiences of ex-offenders of Caribbean birth from the U.S. penal system. In particular, we are working closely with a small group of ex-offenders from New York as well in the prison system, who, while incarcerated, devoted their energies to the youth assistance program. One such returnee spent his final years of his sentence at Mid-Orange Correctional Facility, where he was highly regarded as the leader of the YAP community. To learn more about YAP and practice in the New York prison system and how it can be adapted into the Caribbean context, I traveled to Mid-Orange in May to meet and speak with the individuals involved with this very impressive program. Mid-Orange Superintendent Sarah and his correctional staff, along with Deacon Rosado, were very gracious hosts for my visit, during which I had the unforgettable opportunity to spend almost 3 hours in intense conversation with Mr. Lamarca and an inmate colleague who are active in the youth assistance program. Throughout this lengthy conversation, I could see, hear, and feel the burning passion that he has for helping young people avoid the errors of his youth, for redeeming himself through services to the next generation of young men and women. He spoke with genuine and evident emotion of his own empathy and transformation while incarcerated. He spoke with equal fervor of his eagerness to take his deeply personal message of individual responsibility and rectitude to the young people of his home state. Here in Barbados and other Caribbean nations returned, mature, the reformed ex-offenders are beginning to be seen as an asset rather than a burden, as they bring with them a unique message for the youth that no one else in these societies can deliver. After becoming familiar with YAP in its original setting, and especially through our long dialogue, I see Joseph as being such a community asset and a role model. I believe this to the extent that when he is released back into community, I will see Joseph visit our youth here in the Caribbean as I welcome him, where I am confident that his special character will be profoundly and powerfully received by the young people of these islands. Sincerely, James Goggin, Director of USAID. This guy was the director and the ambassador to the island of Barbados out of the United States of America. He wrote that letter to the parole board for me and asked that I be considered for release. And of course, the parole board shot me down. That brings me to the fact that when you are in the Department of Corrections, they let you go when they want to let you go. They don't give a shit who contacts them. So that was part of the youth program. I went into that YAP program. Since I've come home, I did implement that. I did bring it to the street. I have spoken in over 40, much more than that, various institutions. I've spoken high schools, detention centers, rehabs, group homes, colleges. I've spoken in Iona College several times. I've spoken in many high schools, many juvenile detention centers, Westbury Children's Shelter, Hawthorne Cedar Knolls Detention Center several times. I've spoken to adult groups of parole officers, any youth that are showing signs of it. I had a whole program where I was doing this on a consistent basis, you know. So other people leave in the comments, yo, you sound like you miss being in prison. Someone said that in the comments. I don't miss being in prison. What are you, retarded? Who misses being in prison, right? I'm telling stories about what it was like in there. That's all I'm doing, is that people have a curiosity. And if there's an excitement to the stories, it was a crazy place. It was an exciting place. It was a high adrenaline place. That doesn't mean I miss it. If I missed it, I would go back. You don't see me going back. right? It's just I'm telling stories about the place. So I brought that youth assistance program to the street with me. I put it under another name, and I did it for many years. I haven't done it in the last few years. I'm involved in something else. So back to Mid Orange. I was in this Mid Orange. I know I'm all over the place, but I'm just giving you some stuff. Mid Orange was great. Mid Orange was nice. I had the barbershop above me in Mid Orange, and so I wanted to get a job as the barbershop porter, because this way I lived downstairs and I could just go upstairs and do my job at night real quick. Because my thing in Mid Orange was just studying, reading, writing, playing handball in the yard. I had almost all my time done. There was nothing for me to really do, so I didn't want a job that I was stuck out all day. So I went for the barbershop porter job, and I got the barbershop porter job. And so what I would do is when the barbershop was ready to close at night, I would just go up there and sweep and mop. But what was nice about it is that it was an adorable, adorable female correctional officer up there, about the same age as me. Really cute woman. I'm not going to say her name. That wouldn't be right. But when I went up there to sweep and mop, the prisoners were leaving. All the barbers that cut hair were leaving, because they were done for the day. And so once they would leave, I would go up there and sweep and mop. And eventually it happened. And, I started banging her out. So that was going on for a few months. I would go up there every night and sleep with this woman. It was pretty cool until one of the prisoners ratted us out. That's what it was, a prisoner hating. He sees you accomplish something. He sees you do something that he can't do. He doesn't have the personality to do, or he doesn't have the know-how to do it, or he doesn't know how to move. And so he hates you. Right? There's a hate there. And he drops a note to the administration. Hey, I think this is what's going on. Next thing you know, they call me to the program committee and give me another job. All right. And so I was pulled out of there. Then I was in 2011. That's when I was there. 2000, I think 9, 10, 11. And they closed Mid Orange. Governor Cuomo was closing facilities, a few facilities in New York State to save money. And Mid Orange was one of them. And he, started putting prisoners on the bus, 40, 50 at a time, and just shipping them to different facilities throughout the state because they were closed. It was the only time I had been in a facility that was closed. The guys were sick to leave Mid Orange, man. No one wanted. That's how I ended up in Wallkill prison, So I went to Wallkill prison, which I scored because Wallkill prison was another very decent medium security prison to go to. Before both of those, I was in a prison called Mid-State. And Mid-State was a nightmare because Mid-State was 70%, 60% rapist, right? They had a program there for people who committed a sexual crime. But then there was like 30% of us that just had a regular crime. And we ended up there with all these sexual offenders. And the officers just treated all of us like shit. You know what I mean? I had to get out of there. And I ended up getting out of there and going to Mid Orange. And then I stayed in Mid Orange for a few years. When Mid Orange closed, I got shipped to Wallkill. What was nice about Wallkill is that there were rooms. You could go in a room and shut your door. And when you left your room, you can lock it. I told a little story about Wallkill with my bunkie, my crazy bunkies that I had. So when they closed Mid Orange, the officers were stealing everything that wasn't nailed down. People who were robbing the commissary, robbing the furniture. They were bringing their personal trucks into the facility. They were taking everything they could. It was crazy. It was mayhem in there. I think they closed the place in a matter of 4 months. They got all of us out of there. I wasn't the last bus to go out, but I hung in there for a couple of months before they finally shipped me out. And they moved the officers too. They didn't fire the officers. They moved them to different facilities as well. So that was a little story about Mid Orange Correctional Facility. I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry if this was a boring one, man, but I told you I'm under the weather and I just figured I'd give you a little bit about another facility. Take care, guys. Happy New Year.